Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Kevin Miller, LiveCode CEO, and I'm here today to tell you about how you can deliver dramatically better FileMaker apps that reach an even wider audience. I'm going to be demoing the prototype that we've been building, and then I'm going to take your questions at the end. Let me start off by asking you a question. How many of you are using FileMaker today to deliver mobile solutions? You should see that question appear on the right-hand side of your screen. So if you go over there, you should be able to give that an answer, yes or no. I'll pause for a moment just to see those answers come in. Okay, looks like we're getting some results. Looks like a fair few of you are using mobile. Here is an interesting statistic. 86%. Does anybody want to guess what 86% might refer to? And no, it's not the percentage of the population who uses Facebook as their main source of news, though that might be true one day soon. No, 86% is the market share estimate for Android as made by Gartner in August this year. Now, that figure doesn't say anything, of course, about how much these users like their phones. It doesn't say anything about who's making money selling handsets. I know that I, for one, am perfectly happy with my iPhone, and I'm also perfectly happy to leave these sorts of philosophical questions to others. What it does say to us as app developers is that in a world that is now mobile first, Android is very, very important. We've heard stories about how companies have bring your own device policies, or they've bought Android devices for their employees, and how FileMaker solutions don't play very well on those devices. We know, of course, that FileMaker has a very loyal Mac following. I heard that an estimate that maybe around 3/4 of FileMaker development is done on Macs. And when it comes to deployment, if we're thinking about the desktop platforms, then whilst 3/4 may be developed on Macs, for delivery it's around about 3/4 on Windows. And that makes perfect sense. End users are businesses. End users of FileMaker apps tend to be in all kinds of different companies. And of course, Windows is the larger of the installed operating systems. So we're in exactly the same position with mobile now and with Android. And whatever we may think or feel about it, the reality is that the trend is heading away from iOS. Less than a year ago, it was 82% the Android market share, and now it's 86%. So whatever your thoughts on this subject, from a business perspective, this is something that really does need to be addressed. So what is FileMaker, the company itself, going to do about it? Well, first of all, they have WebDirect. Now, you can't do a number of things that you can do in the main FileMaker product or in FileMaker Go in WebDirect. For example, you can't capture signatures on a device. So, missing features. There are other issues with WebDirect. And the biggest one of those is that it has to be online. You can't run the app offline, so you're reliant on having good, reliable, and consistent signal. Just Tuesday this week, I had a conversation with a major FileMaker solutions provider, and he said that not all of the features of WebDirect work properly in the latest browser and on the Samsung Galaxy, which is the #1 top-selling Android device in the USA right now. And of course, he can't guarantee that there is a reliable connection all of the time. So WebDirect is a solution for Android, but it's not a great solution. And so the next question is, are FileMaker themselves going to do an FN Go for Android? And I've spoken to a number of FileMaker employees, and they've categorically stated that not only are they not going to do this, they're never going to do it. That's actually what they have actually told me. They say not now and not ever. They're an Apple-owned company, obviously, and the internal politics means that this is just not something that they're looking at all. So if you're waiting for FileMaker to solve this problem and give you access to this market, then you're going to be waiting a long time. And this is something that you probably need to be addressing. Even if your clients aren't asking you about it now, then they are going to be pretty soon. With LCFM native, these problems are solved, and quite a few more besides. LCFM native is about expanding your market reach whilst allowing you to produce even more fabulous apps. It works by taking your existing FileMaker apps and deploying them as native apps, and you can deploy those in a platform agnostic way, so you can deploy them to Android, to Linux, as well as to iOS, Windows, or Mac. Now, all of your expertise in FileMaker, all of the work that you put in building those solutions is in FileMaker, and this lets you leverage all of that work by using all of that as the basis for your native app. And also, all of your data stays in FileMaker Server or FileMaker Cloud. So you're going to be able to use these apps alongside your existing FileMaker apps. So you could, for example, deploy a native app on Android and continue to use FileMaker Go on iOS. Native, though, means a far richer and superior customer experience. If you need to access the specific device features, then you're going to be able to do that. So let's say you need to use the fingerprint sensor for authentication. Well, you'll be able to do that. You need to take a photo. Well, that's something that you can do. You need to edit that photo. You can do that. You need to use signatures. You can do that. You need the app to work offline and then sync when you're connected. That's also built in. All of these features add up to rich, high-quality apps at the kind of level and the standard that your customers expect today. The happier your customers are, the more work they're going to want to do with you.
Let me demo how this is going to work. So we've been working on a prototype of the converter. I'm going to start off by showing you my FileMaker database. I'm in FileMaker Pro. And I'm going into Open Remote, where I'm going to choose this FileMaker solution, which is sitting on a FileMaker server. Open that up and just log in the way that you would expect. We have here a very simple notes application, which has got a title, a body, and a space for a signature. There's also a list of all of the different notes, so it's really easy just to go in and navigate. Very, very straightforward application. We've used the LCFM plugin to do the signature component on the desktop. Obviously, if this app was running on iOS, we could use FileMaker signature component. However, I can go in here and I can just change that signature and it will update. So we have a prototype of the importer, and I'm just going to leave that open so that we can see that running. And I'm going to go over into live code and open up the live code application. Now, an application of this level of complexity, the import process will be pretty much point and click, so you're not really going to need to know anything about live code. Certainly if you're using the built-in FileMaker signature component, that will just translate automatically. And that's going to be the case for anything up to medium complexity. At higher levels of complexity, there may be a bit of knowledge needed, and you may need to put some configuration details into your FileMaker database to give hints to the converter to tell it how to do some of the more complex configurations. But I'll come back to that in a moment. Certainly for a layout like this, and for anything up to a kind of medium level, the converter is going to be fully automatic. So my application's running here. It looks pretty similar. I can change this and it will update across in FileMaker pretty much in real time. So the two of these are linked. And transmit across pretty smoothly, pretty much straight away. So LiveCode has the ability to build these applications. It's got something called the standalone application builder, and that creates a native executable for each of the different platforms that we support. So obviously we've got Mac and Windows, and you might want to use this if you need access to more operating system features on those platforms, even though FileMaker does support them, iOS as well. But we also have Linux and Android, and indeed HTML5. So Android, for example, we've got set up here, and all we're doing is building. You put in a couple of details, you put in the name and identifier for your app. This is something that we'll simplify as part of this process, so there'll be less things to configure. And then you choose Save as a standalone application to get that standalone application saved out onto a device. Now, I've just saved this Notes application onto my Google Drive, so it's worth pointing out that Android, unlike iOS, you can simply copy applications onto it in the same way that you could copy on an application onto your desktop computer. You don't have to go through the App Store. Obviously, there is Google Play, but you can just copy applications onto it. So I'm going to go over now to a Android device viewer that I've got running. And I have this Android device plugged in at the moment, so this is a real device that we're seeing. And to use the app, I just go into my Google Drive and I can see the app that's been saved there. Now, if I click on that, Android will just ask me if I want to install it, and I've already done that step. So the app has been installed. It's all pretty straightforward. I can go in and load the app up here and log in, and again we're going to be connecting to the same FileMaker server, same login details. So this is one thing that you will configure when you do your port across to LiveCode. You'll tell LiveCode where that server is. And here we have the app up and running, and it is the same app. So if I go in here, I can go into my title here, notes from a new operating system, and that will of course update straight away on my FileMaker server. And I can go in and edit the signature that I have here. Just draw a little squiggle in that box there. And if I go onto my desktop here, then that will have updated there. So here we have an Android native app complete with signature capture. I want to talk a little bit about why having offline access to your app is so critical. At LiveCode, we're running an online conference called LiveCode Global. That's where we and our customers talk regularly about what we're working on and share best practice with each other. We have a really friendly community, and as it happened just last month, one of our customers, Mark Toluto from Canela Software, did a really great 2-minute clip on explaining why having offline access in an app really matters. Mark's business is in the healthcare industry, and it's a really important issue for them. And what he's done is put together a very clear explanation, so I thought I would share that clip with you just now.
Let's talk tech. We are going to follow the experiences the passengers in this car have during their drive to the countryside. Let's see how things go. Right now, we are at the house getting ready to leave. Both passengers are connected to the Wi-Fi in the house. Life is good. The apps are living up to everyone's expectations. The problem is that the speed and reliability of a home network can only go so far. And as the car drives away, the mobile devices in the car switch over to a mobile connection. Luckily for them, their nearest tower is just blocks away. The connection remains strong, and both passengers are happy. The car is now going through the city, and those tall buildings are causing some interference. One of the passengers has a sad face. The app they are using is hanging. It seems to be dealing with the rough connection poorly. The other passenger, on the other hand, has not even noticed that the data is getting shaky. Let's ponder that in a moment. For now, let's just enjoy the cityscape. Our travelers are driving through the mountains. Unfortunately, both passengers have lost their connection. Both of the passengers realize the connection is broken, and the sad passenger is now getting frustrated. As they check out each other's app and see that they are not having the same experience, frustration turns to anger. Now might be a good time to look out the window and cool off. Yay, we have finally reached the countryside. The mobile connection is now stable. Our happy passenger has had the most enjoyable trip. Productivity for her was high. She is thinking of posting on all of her favorite social media hangouts about her experience. Surely this will only benefit the company that made that app. On the other hand, our frustrated passenger has nothing good to say about his app. He is also thinking of posting his thoughts about his experience. I am sure glad that I am not the developer of that app. Hey, look on the bright side, Mr. Grumpy. We arrived safely at our destination.
Thanks, Mark, for that great explanation. So, how does this work in LCFM native? Let's go back to our app and take a look. So we have the app running on the device as before, and I'm going to go and open the settings screen on Android and turn off the Wi-Fi. So my device is now disconnected from the network. And the first thing that you'll notice is that the app continues to work exactly as you would expect. In fact, it hasn't really changed from the user perspective at all. I can go in, I can make some changes, note from an offline device. I can't type here. Can make those changes there. I can come out of that. I can go into the next one. And then I could, for example, edit my signature. Just put in a couple of big zigzags on that there. And hit done. And of course, none of this is updated on FileMaker server because we're not connected, so there are no changes there. However, if I now go to my settings screen and turn my Wi-Fi back on, and just give that a second or so for it to find the Wi-Fi. That's it connected now. You'll see that my FileMaker server has now updated, and suddenly I have notes from an offline device there, and I have the change to the squiggle diagram that I created. So there was nothing there that the user needed to do. The user didn't need to know anything. The app didn't stop working. I was able just to continue to operate with it, and then as soon as my connection came back, it worked. So while in the simple case there won't be a great deal to think about in terms of synchronization, obviously as your apps get larger and more complex and have lots of layouts and lots of different users and different usage scenarios and so on, you do have the potential for sync conflict. And LCFM native will provide a variety of different modes and methods for handling those sync conflicts. So just to run through quickly what those are. The first one will be that the user picks what to do. So the app will say, oh, there is two versions of this record, which one do you want? And you will be able to choose between those two records. The second option is to use always whichever record is the most recent. So whichever record is newer is the one that gets used. You could then choose to always use the version of the record that's on the server, so the server is always right, or to always use the user, so whatever the user's entered is always right. And finally, if you don't want to do any of that, then you can have a choice which allows an admin to go in and to resolve any sync conflicts. So between those various different modes, it should be possible to make any app work really smoothly and provide a really great end user experience with synchronization. We will be converting the FileMaker scripts. There's a few things to know about that. The first thing is to know that the FileMaker server scripts that you have will stay on the server. Remember, we're connecting this back to FileMaker as a data store. So all of the scripts and logic and indeed relationships and everything else that you set up on FileMaker server will continue to run on FileMaker server, and the client will call those scripts as and when it needs to. So all of that logic is going to be absolutely identical. The client-side scripts will get translated from FileMaker to live code script, and the vast majority of the functionality that we're translating will translate automatically. We've been looking at this, and FileMaker uses a very small subset of the language that live code has, and it should be possible to do a very faithful translation across a huge range of different scripts and up to quite a reasonable level of complexity. There will be a compatibility layer that maps the FileMaker type system into live code. What we mean by that is that variables underneath the hood in FileMaker have got a certain level of precision, for example, so we'll make sure that that level of precision is exactly the same in live code. And that's important if you're doing things like currency calculations, particularly if you're using a currency like yen, where there are a very large number of potential digits in your calculation, and so it's important that that behaves in exactly the same way. Any scripts that are too complex and can't be automatically translated will be flagged by the converter, and it will make recommendations on what to change. And our goal here is to make clear and simple recommendations, and for those recommendations to be things that you're able to do primarily in FileMaker. And the reason for that is that you have a lot of knowledge and experience and understanding of how to do things in FileMaker. And as far as possible, we don't want you to have to learn a whole load of new live code. We'd like that learning to be as incremental as possible. So rather than having to learn it to understand the complexities of translating these scripts, we'll make recommendations. And generally speaking, you should be able to apply changes in FileMaker, whether that's the scripts or whether that's providing a few hints or hidden fields or whatever within the database to tell the conversion process how it's going to work. Can't say that's going to be perfect in every case, but for the most part, we should be able to get you there and get you having your native app using the knowledge and experience that you already have. So LCFM native will also allow the integration of live code script into FileMaker scripts by using structured comments within your FileMaker. So you put in a comment, live code, answer hello world. Now the purpose for that is to allow you to have a single source. So the idea is that you'll be able to use your FileMaker solution as the source, and if you want live code to do special things in live code mode, then you can insert those scripts in FileMaker if you so choose, and then live code will know that when it's running, it needs to run and execute those scripts. So we want to make this, we know that you update your databases, you iterate over things, you make changes, you want a new version of your native app. And if you have to apply a whole variety of brand new changes every single time you go into live code, it's going to make the process pretty arduous. So as I say, the goal is to have a single source solution for your LCFM native stuff, and to allow you to access and tell live code what it needs to do. So you'll be able to do things like access variables that have been defined in the scripts, or very tight integration into live code. And if you need to pass data into a live code object to have it do something and then pass it back to FileMaker, then all of that's going to be possible. And the level of learning involved is going to be constrained to just learning how to do that one step and then move forward from there. The other thing that's really important to say is, it all comes down to this principle of using FileMaker as a source. We will allow you in your FileMaker database to specify objects in FileMaker that will get replaced with live code native object sets whenever the file is converted. So what that means is that you can get a region of your screen, for example, in FileMaker, and you can define that when that gets converted, that should get replaced with, for example, the contents of a live code application running inside a particular region in your database. And the beauty of that is that it means that you only need to understand just enough live code to add that one feature. So if you want to add an enhanced signature component using some of the live code capabilities, you can go in, you can look at the live code lessons, you can figure out just how to do that one piece, you can write that piece, you can understand how the data will come in from FileMaker with a couple of function calls and how to send it back with a couple of function calls, and you've got that self-contained piece of functionality. So maybe in a few hours or a day or so, even without knowing any live code, you could go in and just learn how to do that piece, add that in, and then every time you do that translation, the native app will insert that piece of work that you've done into that place, and it'll be ready to go. So you're really leveraging as much of your FileMaker knowledge and your FileMaker database as a source here as possible. But then you've got all of the advantages of just being able to incrementally learn and add little bits and pieces and add specific pieces of functionality that you need to make your app work really, really well. So this is a good moment. I think I've shown you how the architecture for this is going to work. This is probably a good moment to step back. And what I want to do now is just take a few minutes to show you a few live code applications that have been written by some of our customers. And the purpose for showing you that is to illustrate to you the kinds of functionality that you will be able to add to your own applications. So when you're looking at these apps, take a close look at the user interface, the user experience, the sorts of features that I'm about to show you, and think about the fact that you will be able to add anything that you see just now into your FileMaker apps, and you'll be able to do it very incrementally, just one little piece of functionality at a time. So the first app I want to show you is an app for Sony Music, and this app is to record music royalties. Sony are the world's #1 music publisher. They have something like 2/3 of all music royalties going through this. So whenever you buy a track or play a song or use Spotify, it's something that they process the transactions on. So this is a really big data application. It's running on Android, and I've got my Android viewer up here to show it to you. And we log in, and I'm obviously just using a dummy account and dummy data here in this demo. So the app is a really nicely designed app. I'm showing you on Android. It does also run on iOS as well. If I just load up some dummy data here, we should be able to see some of the content. The flickering that you're seeing is actually a result of the remote app that I'm using to view the Android screen. It's not actually flickering on my Android screen, and there's also a very slight lag coming through on that as well, so just ignore that. So here's a dashboard. It shows the earnings split up by country, and I can go in and see that, and I can also choose to view a map view, which shows me my earnings by territory, and it lights up on the map the sections of the globe where I've had music sales, so it's quite a nice visual indication, and there's a little graph below that shows all of the various different sections. So if I open up one of those, I can see, for example, Scandinavia has a certain number of track sales. So this app, I had to pass some intense security requirements for Sony. Obviously, it carries a lot of very sensitive data. It's one of those apps that was made and tested very thoroughly to make sure that it was able to meet those requirements. It obviously works with huge data backend, and it's a mission critical app for Sony. And what you may not know just looking at it is that the company that made it, Digital Pomegranate, that made it for Sony, are a startup, and they started in they're based in Armenia and in New York. And what they did was they came out of a World Bank project to train women who'd never written any code before, and so they learned live code and worked their way up and built various apps, and ultimately ended up landing Sony as a client. So the next app I want to talk about is Midnight Rises from Industrial Toys. There are many good-looking apps built in live code, but I picked this one because it's been made by the same folks that did Halo. I'm not sure if it's in the App Store at the moment. I think they're working on an update for it, but this is running on iOS, and it just gives you an idea of a really beautiful interactive graphic novel that the guys there did with animation, interactivity. The whole game is cloud-based, so whatever path you take through this story has an impact on the story for their 3D game, which is a separate download that they have. And it's just one of these apps that's absolutely beautifully produced with really great graphics. And so if you're thinking from a business perspective, you might want to replace those graphics with charts or with an interactive survey or something, but these are all the sorts of features that you would potentially be able to add to your FileMaker applications using LCFM native, if that's something that you need to do for your customers. So the next app is an Android app here called Clean Edge. Now this is an app that's being built by a provider of hospital curtains, and curtains in hospitals have to be replaced on a very regular basis to meet fairly stringent hygiene standards. And in fact, they get rotated at a different schedule depending on whether it's a high dependency unit or a regular ward. And so what this app does is it tracks whether or not a curtain has been replaced. These are plastic curtains that detach, and they have RFID tags in them. And so you take your Android device and you go and scan the curtains, and it tells you whether or not you have replaced the curtains. And this would actually have been a really good app for FileMaker from the data storage point of view, but of course You're not able to go to Android, and you're not able to access RFID tags with FileMaker. So it's a great little example of something that can be built, or some extra functionality that you can add by using LCFM native. And the final app I want to show you is a piece of software called VP Link. And this is a simulator that's used for training and safety testing in chemical plants and for other industrial processes. And it's been used in quite a few high-profile places. It's used to model safety in Chinese nuclear power reactors, and it's used a lot in the oil industry, and it's also used in a project that they called Don't Drop the Space Shuttle, where they modeled the use of the crane on this that was used to lift the space shuttle and the solid fuel that was used. So a really interesting project, and I'm showing you it. It runs on Windows and on Android, and I'm showing you it on the desktop just to give you an idea of a more complex UI that you can put together. This is a simulator that runs processes. You can bring in images, you can bring in graphics, you can create hundreds of different elements, and it can also connect to various pieces of hardware. And VP Link's been a long-standing LiveCode customer, and they were recently acquired by the Wood Group, so a huge success story there. But hopefully that gives you some inspiration as to the sorts of things that are possible and that you could do using LCFM native. Okay, so the licensing options that we're proposing for this are straightforward. We'll charge $2 per active user per month. An active user is defined as somebody who's using the software. If they don't use it, then you won't be charged. We also have annual, perpetual, and vertical licenses available for those that need them. Perpetual is probably not such a great fit within the mobile space because both Android and iOS are rapidly moving targets that require you to update your apps on a regular basis. However, the option is there if you need it. And vertical licenses are where we license your application as a whole rather than counting users, so come and talk to us about that if that's what you need. If you somehow have licensing options that sit outside these options that we have available here, then again, do come and talk to us. We will be very happy to have a conversation with you. We also have a service option to convert your app. Obviously, if it's a simple app, you probably don't need that. But if it's a more complex app and you really don't want to spend any time digging into all of the conversion options, then that's certainly something that we can look at doing for you. So we've been talking to a lot of you about this project, and it's been really well received so far. Genuine enthusiasm from a lot of you. And what we've done is we've done a short interview with Harry from Magic Solutions, and Magic are a FileMaker Platinum partner that have been doing what they do for decades, in fact, and they're also an early backer of LCFM Native. So Harry's been interviewed by Chris, and he's going to talk a bit about what they do and how they see LCFM Native benefiting Magic's business. So they've been interviewed by Chris on our team, and I'm going to switch over to that interview just now.
So Harry, if you could just tell us briefly about what your company does.
Well, Magic Solutions Limited is a bespoke software solutions developer, but we specialise in FileMaker, and we've been in business roughly as we are for nigh on 25 years. Started off as a group of 3 guys. These days we have a team of 10, plus 1 or 2 sort of subcontractors who do some graphic design work for us and work of that description. Magic is also a partner stroke platinum FileMaker developer, and so for those sort of 25 years we've held that platinum badge for nigh on 20 of those years. So we've been connected with FileMaker in a big way for a long period of time.
Gosh, okay. Can you tell us anything about the solutions that you're planning on using LCFM Native for?
Sure. We Magic don't specialise in any particular market. We tend to class ourselves more as a gun for hire. We understand business, and so we've got a wide spread of solutions out there that really solve a wide variety of problems. Despite that variety, there's a sort of common ground with many of them, that they all have this idea or this desire that they would like to have an app where that app could accompany them when they're out in the field. So, good examples of this is we deal with travel organizations and tour operators, and they have tour managers who are quite literally in any part of the world, in any particular country, which may or may not be within scope of any sort of cell or Wi-Fi, and yet they need to have information about the sort of complex itineraries that they're traversing with groups of people. Other good examples where we have civil engineers, people who are out on site remotely. They need to be able to carry reference material for the building environment that they're working in with them. And they also equally and importantly need to record operating data whilst they're there, because this then is sent back to head office at convenient points in time in order for them to generate things like KPI reports internally and manage quality control. If we look at something else, we've got document storage facilities. They use like massive secure warehouses where they're not really worried about extending networking in there because they are secure facilities. Yet they still require the opportunity to carry a small device with them that allows them to record what their picking and packing lists are for the documents that they need to collect or return. Plus, they also need to have things like barcode scanners in there as well. So once these pieces of data are recorded, they want to get back somewhere and they want to upload that data into the head office system.
And so what are the things that really excite you about the LCFM native? I mean, in terms of the ones you've mentioned, I guess the online-offline sync, that's obviously quite important.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the key things that really fired us up are quite literally, if we go back to those example clients that I've just given you, there are a couple of key factors that are being specifically addressed by LCFM native. Firstly, as you mentioned, our clients are looking for the possibility to have an offline data source with them. But equally importantly, they need to be able to synchronize any of that offline data back once they've updated it. They are also looking for something that is not necessarily and distinctly iOS based. Now, FM Go, we know, is only working on iOS-based devices. The only other way that we've got at this stage in the game really to start deploying FileMaker is online, and it's via either WebDirect or it's via some sort of custom web publishing front end. But really, it sort of limits us in the way that our clients want to use it. Equally important to this is that our clients love FileMaker. They're really, really comfortable with it. They like it because they can get involved in the working and the development side if they want to, and they don't really want to divorce themselves from that, but they need to have extensibility. All of those boxes are just being ticked by LCFM native. If you look at it from our perspective, from a development perspective alone, it allows us to basically prototype anything that we're producing in LCFM native within FileMaker itself. Prove it out, do all the testing, get to a point where we have a product that's working, and then run it through that sausage machine. Ultimately, we've then got something that we can put out anywhere.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to add about LCFM?
The opportunity that this probably gives us in being able to produce an app means that we can actually go to the rest of our clients and discuss in a bit more detail what they're doing, what the possibilities are for their use for this, and offer them a solution to it. What will be a great selling tool is that we have the opportunity to deliver a FileMaker solution to people, but be able to deploy it in a platform agnostic scenario. And that's really cool for us. It's almost like the missing link for Magic. This tool will allow us to just extend everything that we're already doing in FileMaker out to all of those areas that we currently can't reach. And for me, that means Christmas has come early.
That's excellent. Thanks so much for that, Harry. That was really
All right,
great.
cheers. Pleasure, Chris.
Well, thanks very much to Harry for doing that interview. Let me talk a bit about the campaign that we're running at the moment. So, as you've probably seen from the demo and all of the various moving parts that's involved in putting this project together, the engineering effort involved in this project is about the same scale as, and probably in fact a bit bigger than the whole of the LCFM plugin project that we've done to date, all over again. And if we were doing this project on a service basis, then of course we would ask for a deposit before the work commenced. But the deposit for this is too large for any one company to come up with. So this campaign is a way to spread that cost over the FileMaker community so that it's not too expensive for any one company. And it also lets us prove that the market is indeed large enough to make this project viable. It's a pretty common thing to crowdfund software projects these days. And so as much as getting a deposit on some of the costs, we're also looking for enough confidence to make sure that this market really is large enough to proceed. This is a major project. And before we delve into it and commit a huge resource to this, we need to be really confident that the market demand is there and that we're able to reach the market. The responses that we've had to this campaign so far have broadly split into two categories, and I think it's worth just talking about this for a second. The first has been that we have an immediate need and are ready to back the campaign, and that's absolutely awesome. That's fabulous. So please go and do that. The second campaign that we've heard a fair bit of is that there's a really good chance that we're going to have a need in the next few months, depending on what work we land or what customers we speak to. And so I appreciate that if you're in that camp, then crowdfunding this right now is perhaps a little bit more of a challenge. However, if you think about it from the perspective of this project and from our perspective, if we get $1,000 now and $5,000 in 6 months when a project appears and so forth, this isn't a project we're going to be able to do because it's not like a simple feature addition that just takes a few days to do where we start, there's a client requirement, we come in and a week later we've got it done. It's a massive engineering task, and so we either have to get enough people together to justify doing it, or it's not something that we're going to be able to do. So this is something that we would ask you to view as an R&D expense. It's not tremendously expensive to back the campaign. It starts at just $500. And I will say that we've had a lot of success with crowdfunding in the past, but in the few cases where a campaign that we've run hasn't succeeded, we really often get people coming back just a few months later and saying how they have the need now and how they wish that the time for this is now. Let's get some momentum into this campaign. If we don't get enough funds pledged, then obviously this isn't a project that we're going to be able to do. Quite a few of you have said that you are going to pledge, so don't sit on the fence. You don't have to pay anything until the end of the campaign. So let me just show you quickly how you go and make a pledge. So this is the page. It's at filemaker.livecode.com /native, and this is our campaign. And all you have to do is scroll down to where you get to the various different pledges, and then choose what you want to do. So you can choose between a store credit to the value of your pledge. So your participation is essentially free in that you get a credit towards whatever licensing costs you'll have down the line. Or you can have layouts converted by our team. So you can choose whichever one you want, and if you change your mind later, don't worry, just talk to us and we'll be more than happy to change where that pledge goes. Then you go into the Buy Now link, and it comes up with the item, and then you take it through to checkout. And in the checkout, you can pay your pledge right now by credit or debit card, and if you do that, then if the campaign doesn't happen, then you'd be refunded at the end, or you might just prefer to choose the pay later option. And that means that you'll get charged when the campaign is closed. So if you are keen on this campaign, then please go and do this just now. We need to get some momentum on the campaign. As I say, several dozen of you have said you are going to back it, so don't wait any longer. There is no requirement to pay anything. It does take 3, 4, 5 minutes to fill out this form, but it does allow us to count your pledge and push this forward to make this campaign happen. So I hope you're as excited about LCFM as we are, and you can go and make that pledge right now. So in summary then, the goal behind LCFM Native is to use your existing FileMaker solutions and as much of your existing knowledge that you have already in the FileMaker universe to create outstanding native apps. To be able to deploy those apps to all platforms, including Linux and also Android, and Android is now 86% of the mobile market. And we have a campaign running, which is going to close in the next couple of weeks. So if this is something that you are interested in and want to see happen and want to support and want to work with us on, then please go and back our campaign now to make this happen. Thank you all very much indeed for listening. I now have a few minutes to take your questions.
Okay, lots and lots of questions here. So it looks like the first question, let me just scroll down here and have a quick look. Okay, so it wasn't so much a question, it was just a comment there from Bruce. The pertinent percentage is, are my target users moving away from iOS rather than the total market? Bruce, I think that's a good question, but I think there's a couple of other questions to ask there as well. One of them is, will they ever move away from iOS, even if they're not doing it just now? Are they likely to move away at some point in the future? And the second question is, are there any new customers that you would like to get? Now, it may well be that the answer to both of those questions is no, and that your customers are perfectly happy on iOS and you don't want any new ones. But I think it's definitely worth pausing for a moment and actually asking those questions, because I think that's what this project is really about. Okay, so a couple of comments here from Paul. Control over what syncs is essential. Selective sync for push to server and pull from server. Some tables should sync and some tables should not sync as they are mobile only. Okay, so absolutely, Paul, you will have control over that. So in terms of, hang on a second, I'll just get this information here. So what you will be able to do is you'll be able to define which tables sync, and if any of the tables are local only, so those tables shouldn't go out and do any syncing. And you'll also be able to define different modes on different parts of the file. So you really will have the fine-grained control you need if that's something that's going to be essential for your application. Okay, so next question is from Nico. What are the licensing issues with FileMaker concerning connections? So we're going to be using a combination of the Data API, ODBC, basically all of the various different interfaces that we have to connect to FileMaker. There'll actually be a live code server component sitting on Google Cloud, which will sit between the client and FileMaker server to do a lot of the more complex aspects of these transactions. In terms of the actual licensing, that I think FileMaker have said they are planning to charge for the Data API. We don't know how much yet. That's obviously a question for them. But our goal here is to play nicely with FileMaker, and it's obviously reasonable that they get their fair share for the work that they've done. Truly, can a native app be completely or mostly offline, and what is the minimum FileMaker server? So absolutely, you can define your app to be mostly or completely offline. The way that works is that we'll be using a local SQLite database to do the caching. So if you set your tables up to be working in offline modes, then you can set them to cache locally, and you can have an app that works either mostly or entirely offline. Okay, so a question here from William Porter. Does the offline syncing work only when it's specifically requested? What about the problem of dealing with wonky connections? So you will be able to define explicitly when synchronization should happen, or you can simply let LCFM native work out the suitable points to do so. So it's up to you, really. In terms of wonky connections, assuming that your solution doesn't perform operations which require offline access, such as perform script on server, then your native app is going to handle that pretty gracefully, so it won't sync until the full current sync can succeed. If there are options which do require online access, then as soon as the app determines that they're not possible, the user would be notified by that in the UI. and then it would be able to disable actions for which it has to access the server in order to function. So it does come down to a large extent on how your app and your server have been designed. Okay, a couple of comments here. Keep the focus on LCFM. Yes, absolutely. That roadmap's all still happening very smoothly at the moment. Truly, if I pledge, when will I have access to try out an RC? Well, truly, the aim is to have something happening in the first quarter of next year in terms of this technology actually starting to appear. I think we put down April to be into release candidate as the target. Obviously, if you make a big pledge, then we'll work with you a lot sooner. We're looking for a small number of companies that are putting in a bit more to work with from the very start of this project and start to play with the earlier prototypes. But everybody that gets in on the ground floor with this project will get the opportunity to work with us, and we'll make sure that your apps work really well and go into our test framework and go through the conversion process and all the little issues and edge cases and so on get properly ironed out. Okay, question from Paul. How do you know if a user is active during a month? So Paul, we will be monitoring that on the Google Cloud component we've got that sits between your LCF native and the FileMaker server. Damien, is there a definitive list of supported FileMaker functions or custom functions supported? So we are aiming to support as large a set of FileMaker functions and syntax as we possibly can. And we should really be able to support, as I say, a huge amount of it, because the live code language is a lot larger and more extensive than the FileMaker language. If there's something that we can't support for whatever reason when we've gone through all of the process, then that would be something that the converter would flag up and tell you and make suggestions on how to change. In terms of supporting plugins, FileMaker LCFM native isn't FileMaker, so it won't load FileMaker plugins. The majority of functions from a lot of those plugins, though, are already available in live code. I mean, for example, base elements, a lot of that functionality is built into, in fact, I think all of that functionality is built into live code. So you should generally be able to map a lot of that stuff over appropriately. And it's also worth pointing out that live code has a plugin interface itself, and there would be nothing to stop third-party plugin vendors choosing to support LCFM native. And in fact, if they did that, they'd be supporting the whole live code platform. So that might be an interesting conversation for some of them. Okay, question from Paul. What are the timescales for LCFM native? So we're aiming to close the campaign on the 24th of November, and then we will be developing it over the course of the next few months. So we'll start to show some technology in the first quarter next year, and we're aiming to be release candidate by April. Can we offer conversion services now? Yes, absolutely. If your need is urgent or you want to do this on a service basis, we've got enough prototype technology that we'd be able to convert an app for you just now. It's one thing to have a prototype that will do a decent job. It's another thing to have something that we will ship to the public, but we could certainly work with you on a service basis if that's something that you need. Okay, I've got any other questions? A couple of comments on crowdfunding. The crowdfunding approach makes me nervous. You're planning on needing crowdfunding for future updates. Well, I mean, we've done a number of crowdfunding campaigns over the years, Ethan, and we've delivered a really good set of results against those. I think we've delivered, I don't know, something like 95% of everything that we've ever put up for crowdfunding, and there's a few pieces of projects still ongoing and getting polished off. It is as much as anything about proving to us that there is a market here that's big enough. It's a big leap of faith for us to take. We spent the last few months working very closely in the FileMaker community. We went out to the FileMaker conference. I've just returned from a West Coast tour where I visited all of the FileMaker user groups down the West Coast in 5 cities. And it's, we're getting very, very good feedback on it. But it's one thing to get good feedback on it, and it's enough to be sure that there really is enough market demand. There's a lot of demand from our time. There are a lot of really exciting projects that we can do. Right now, this is certainly not the only one by any means, and so this is about us really understanding that there is definitely a market that's absolutely there, present, and willing to pay for this at the scale that we're looking for. In terms of ongoing crowdfunding after this, I don't think that will be necessary, simply because the revenue from this, I mean, it should be pretty decent, pretty stable. Obviously, we'll cross that bridge if we come to it, but if we get the sort of numbers out of this that we're looking for, then we probably won't need to do it again unless we do something massive like a huge redesign or something for it. Never say never, but it wouldn't be something that we'd be planning anytime soon after bringing it out, certainly. Carl, does the offline syncing work with iOS, Mac, and Windows as well? Yes, absolutely. It will work on all of the platforms, even Linux. Romain, do we need physical access to the file to create the app? Do you need physical access to the FileMaker file in order to be able to create the app? Yes, you will need that. Aria, what's the minimum pledge? The minimum pledge is $500. Paul, Ari, the Google Cloud Proxy, what security will be in place to protect data and encryption? Paul, that's a great question. A really, really good question. Lots is the answer in short. So we've dealt with clients that have had some extremely high security requirements, and everything that we're planning around this will take security into account. I mean, the protocol between our cloud layer and the app will be secure, as well as obviously all of the other connections involved. It's designed with security through and through, and that's something that we take very, very seriously. Okay, Matt, has there been any difficulty publishing the APKs generated by LCFM into the Google Play Store? So our history here is publishing the APKs generated by LiveCode, which is essentially the same thing in terms of the actual APKs. And no, absolutely not. I mean, the main thing has been just to stay on top of all of the various new versions of Google Android that come out on quite a regular basis. The SDK is a fast-moving target, and so we have to do updates, but we do them on a very regular basis, and we've got lots of good apps in the App Store. I mean, that app I showed you earlier, the Sony app, I mean, that's in the Google Play Store, for example. Bruce, maybe worthwhile to consider yet another category for the really small developers, perhaps $200 to $250. I guess we could. Probably makes the beta program a really, really wide thing, I suppose. I'll weigh that up, Bruce. I'm not going to make a commitment on that. I'll weigh that up. We'll talk about it internally. I think we want to sort of work with a smaller number of companies at this stage, but that's interesting. I'll find out if there's more support for that. A question from Marco: does the native apps use the FileMaker logon? Yes, you log on to FileMaker server, absolutely. Bruce, any time limit to when offline devices will sync with the server, such as days, weeks, or months offline? That is a question that I don't actually know the answer to from the top of my head. I'd be very surprised if the answer was that there was any sort of limit. Let me just go over and see if our technology director has got anything to say on that one. Oh yes, he just says yes, no, LiveCode's had Android support for several years, just jumping back to the previous question. Never been a problem pushing APKs to the App Store. He might have a view on the timing for the offline stuff, so we'll just give him a few seconds, see if it pops up an answer. I'll move on to Paul in the meantime. How do you manage updates when loaded directly onto the device? So what you have to do is think about how your update architecture is going to work. If you think about FileMaker Go, you can load a FileMaker file into that essentially. So the app is one thing, and then the file is another thing. So you can update the file that way. Now you can structure your LiveCode app to be the same. So essentially, your LiveCode app is something that gets downloaded, for example, and that way you have something that is completely up to date. If you need to update the actual executable, which we'll have to do from time to time, then you can put a new version of that into the App Store or into Google Play and use the built-in mechanisms that Apple and Google have provided to do that. Okay, so yes, the answer, Bruce, to your question is that no, there won't be any limits. The app will be able to sync whenever it can, but obviously the longer that you don't sync for, then the higher the risk of any sync conflicts. Okay, well, we're almost at the hour, and I think we've just got through to the last question, so how's that for timing? Looks like it's come together pretty well. I've got 2 more minutes left, so if anybody has any last questions, I'm going to hang around for just a moment before we wrap this thing up. Matt, will your apps be able to provide FileMaker error codes upon encountering a problem? For instance, field gets renamed after the APK gets deployed. Yes, absolutely. There'll be error tracking in it, so you will be able to do that. Marco, how do you manage accounts between FileMaker server and some native offline app? So Marco, I probably don't have time to go into that in a huge amount of detail, but you manage the accounts. The Google Cloud there that we've got will do that management. Okay, a few good comments there. Great demo, exciting. Good luck. That's brilliant. I'm really pleased to hear that people are positive about this. We've had a lot of positive feedback on it. If this is something you're interested in, do go and pledge. Let's get this campaign moving forward. Okay, we've got 1 more minute left. Any last questions? We're just about to wrap it up now. Question from Aria. Can we have access to the demo APK and FileMaker sample file to test? Probably a little bit down the line, Aria. I'm not sure that I'm entirely ready. Thanks for the comment, Dennis. Larry, looking forward to seeing, or maybe you're talking about Heather. Larry, looking forward to seeing this in the real world. Yeah, absolutely. Paul, if we pledge and you don't go ahead, will you get a refund? Yes, you will. Absolutely. And you can you could even just choose to pay later, in which case if it doesn't go ahead, you won't be charged. Or if you want to pay now, then we'll just refund it if it doesn't go ahead. And what you get when the pledge is fulfilled? Question from Patrick. So you get a credit. You either get a service to convert your app for you, so you don't have to think about any of this stuff, or you get a credit towards the monthly licensing fees, Patrick. Truly, if the app on iOS is behind a configured or restricted device with access to Google blocked, will the app work? That is a question that I do not know the answer to. Let me see if Mark has got a comment on that one. Come back to that in a second. Let's just see if Mark chimes in with anything on that. Damien, I'm really excited about pledging. Fantastic, Damien. That's really wonderful.
It's worth noting that there are a number of pledges already coming in, which is quite exciting. So thanks.
Yeah, brilliant. That's really...
Yeah.
Yes. So Mark's saying he's not sure if he understands the question. So the network that Truly is on, I think, blocks access or will block access to a number of. Am I right in saying it blocks access to certain ports or it blocks access to Google specifically?
Thank you, Audrey. I see your pledge. It's fantastic.
Okay, so truly, the app will require access to the internet, and it will have to reach the Google system if it's not purely offline. However, you would be able to install all of this on premise. That would be the other way to do this. So that might be that you could install it locally inside your environment. But the proxy server is going to be running using an HTTP REST interface, so it's pretty unlikely to be blocked. Okay, I think we are at the end now. We've just gone slightly over our hour, so I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm going to say thank you all very much indeed for coming. If you do have any questions, comments, you're not sure if it will work for you, or whatever those questions are about any aspect of this, or about licensing, or anything at all that we can help with, we are here to help. We are responsive, so just drop myself a line, drop Chris a line, use the live chat that's up on the FileMaker website. However you want to get in touch, I'm more than happy to schedule a Skype call with any of you to discuss any of this, and so is Chris and some of the other guys in our team. You can also write to us. Yeah, Heather's just put up the address there. You can email us at support@livecode.com. So get in touch if you've got any questions. Thank you all very much indeed for joining us. Let's make this happen. And goodbye from me and from us at LiveCode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.